welcome to Channel 3 News. I'm Olivia Cohen.
And I'm Stephanie Anketa. Today we'll be focusing on our very own Long Island Sound, specifically the organisms and plant life found in the salt marshes.
Salt marshes are imperative to the marine and human community in a number of different ways. The rich nutrients are helpful in building healthy marine life within the area, while the tall reeds and variety of vegetation make it possible for small creatures to grow and develop in the marshes without fear of predators.
On another level, salt marshes protect us from major storms or natural disasters. It turns out that high salt levels can be an advantage for marshes when it comes to withstanding a beating. In the more saline areas, the plants produce dense webs of thick roots that bore deep into the ground, forming a kind of anchor that keeps the soil from being eroded.
It is important that as a community, we strive to protect these salt marshes by monitoring the growth of Phragmites, keeping track of the salinity levels, assessing tidal restrictions, and sampling fish above and below tidal restrictions to determine the impact on fish.
Oh, I agree. So this morning, we are going to be discussing some of the plants and animals that live within the tangly reeds of our very own salt marshes.
Let's turn to Hayden Stein for a closer look at the plants.
Hayden Stein here at the Long Island Sound Salt Marshes on this beautiful Saturday morning. Here's our first plant we'll be examining. It is called the saltwater cordgrass, or Spartina alterniflora. It has flat, smooth blades, as you can see here, and it grows to 3 to 7 feet high. In the summer and spring, it has flowering. Right here, it goes into flowering stalks. In the summer, it turns mostly green color, and also in the spring. In the winter and fall, it gets to be a light brown, as you can see in this season. Back to you, Stephanie.
Saltwater cordgrasses are taller than salt meadow cordgrass and with flat, smooth blades. Salt marsh cordgrass grows along the sides of marsh creeks and in places flooded by the tides. Cordgrasses are able to survive in areas flooded by saltwater because of the regulatory system they have developed that gets rid of unneeded salt on the leaf edges.
The root system of salt marsh cordgrass helps stabilize the marsh mud. Besides securing a habitat for other plants and animals, cordgrass is a major component in the diet of the island's deer. Around the marsh creeks and in the wettest areas, you'll find the upper part of the shells of ribbed mussels projecting from the mud. These filter feeders attach themselves by means of a strong byssal thread to the marsh grass to withstand the pull of the tides.
Let's take a closer look at salt meadow cordgrass. Hayden, back to you.
Hi, and welcome back to the Long Island Sound Salt Marshes, more inland this time, looking at a different plant. Here we have the common, or known as Spartina patens. It can grow up to be 8 feet tall and is eaten by many organisms of the Long Island Sound. The soil underneath, it holds it together very well, therefore it can't blow over very easy like wind conditions such as today. Back to you, Stephanie.
Salt meadow cordgrass, the shorter, wiry-looking grass of the marshes, is usually found on the higher flats of the marsh flooded only by the high tides. Salt meadow cordgrass serves as a nesting area for some of the marsh birds.
Gosh, this is so interesting. Hayden, why don't you tell us about glassworts?
And we're back at the Long Island Sound Salt Marshes, going a bit lower this time, seeing a different plant that grows more on the floor. It is called Salicornia, or more commonly known as glasswort. As you see here, it usually is less than 30 centimeters tall. Its leaves are very small and scaly, as you can see here, and in the summer it's usually green, but turns a more brownish red in the fall. It tastes like salt, but I'm not going to show you that. Reporters, back to you.
Glasswort has fleshy, jointed stems. Its name comes from the Greek and means salt horn. It has a pleasant, salty taste and can be used to make salt pickles. The fleshy stems of the glasswort hold moisture in so the plant does not dry out and die. This plant's survival mechanism is extremely interesting as well. When immersed in salt water, it uses a pathway to take in carbon dioxide from the atmosphere.
Ah yes, those glassworts. So funny looking, aren't they? But let's move on to the common reed, also known as the Phragmites. Hayden, back to you.
This just in, we have an invasive species here. It's called the Phragmites plant, or more commonly known as the common reedgrass. It grows up to 10 to 15 feet tall, and it grows anywhere but saltwater. It doesn't break down, takes up a lot of space, and nothing can eat it. It's crazy! Back to you, Olivia!
Phragmites is an invasive species to Long Island Sound. In Connecticut, the native type is found in the brackish tidal marshes where it grows interspersed with other vegetation. The introduced type tends to form large, dense stands in the variety of wetland systems. These dense stands crowd out other vegetation, changing both the flora and fauna of these areas, as well as often changing the nutrient cycling and hydrology of these wetlands.
For example, bird and vegetation surveys in 40 salt and brackish marshes showed that there were significantly fewer species of birds and state-listed species in Phragmites-dominated wetlands than in short-grass marshes.
Now that we've covered the plant life in the salt marshes, let's turn the program over to Sarah Rosaband, better known as Gastropod Girl, who will give us a lowdown on the organisms of the salt marsh.
We're in a certain area of the Long Island Sound salt marsh where the fiddler crab, Yucca pygnus, is found. Here we are in the land of the fiddler crab. As you can see, it's full of holes as they bore holes to protect against predators. We found one on the scene. See that? Now you can't tell because he's covered in mud, but they range from yellow to brown, and they can bore holes up to 52 centimeters. 52! Look what I just found. The Modiolus demyssus, more commonly known as the ribbed mussel. Now to identify this, you can see the ribs on its yellow, brown, greenish body. It's really a lot of different colors. It grows to about 4 inches in size, attaches to reeds and plants with their abyssal threads, which is an attachment mechanism that most mussels use. When there's high tide, the 2 shells of this bivalve open and let in all the nutrients and food that there is. When it's low tide, a lot of nutrients go out, but it holds in a lot as well, and also holds in many toxins, which is why we cannot collect these mussels at low tide. Fun fact, the ribbed mussel is in the phylum Mollusks, but it's not a snail. This is the common mud snail, Nassarius obsoletus. They're usually black grayish or brownish, and sometimes have a fuzzy growth, as this one does, as they are often encoded in mud. They're up to 1 inch in length and have cone-shaped shells, and have exactly 6 whorls, which is the equivalent of 6 spirals of a shell. They have no known predators, but there are also ducks and shorebirds that sometimes eat them. These mud snails are carnivores, and they locate their food by the odors, and they take a trail to find dead and decaying organisms that they can prey on. Fun fact, these snails breathe air. In order to adapt to the environment, the snails climb up the grasses during high tide so that they are not submerged by water.
Thank you, Gastropod Girl.
Now, let's go back to Todd's Point, where Liz Stollard, a videographer who specializes in salt marshes of Long Island Sound, will show us live footage to further educate you all at home about our very own salt marshes. Take a look.
At this moment, the tide is not low enough for us to venture out to the mudflats, but that doesn't mean that these important natural areas should be overlooked. Mudflats are muddy areas next to salt marshes and are largely affected by the local tides. Because the Long Island Sound has semi-diurnal tides, meaning there are 2 low and 2 high tides per day, mudflats constantly receive nutrients. This abundance comes from the tidal flow as well as the nearby marsh, and allows many plankton and filter feeders to live in the mudflats. Below the surface, crustaceans and burrowing animals also take advantage of the rich soil in and around the mudflats. The high marsh has sandier soil than the low marsh, and is obviously seated at a higher elevation. Because of its height, it is exposed to air for very long periods of time, and evaporation occurs. This leads to very high salinity levels that are almost 4 times greater than those of seawater. The high salinity makes it hard for many plants to survive, but glasswort is one of the few plants able to withstand the salt. The low marsh is covered by tides for most of the day, resulting in the inability to hold dissolved oxygen. Spartina alterniflora, or smooth cordgrass, and some types of algae are the only plants able to survive in this zone.
Thank you for that remarkable footage, Liz. We hope all of you at home enjoyed today's segment on salt marshes in Long Island Sound, and that you'll continue to appreciate all that they have to offer.
From your friends at Channel 3 News, stay classy, Connecticut.
What?
What?
It looks like a Cinderella.
What?
Say hi, guys. Say hi.
What?
Say hi.
Hi.